the first piece is looking at, starting your career in sustainability. So, how do you kickstart things? Claire, you spend a lot of time with graduates, and throughout your career, you've focused in this space. So, one of the questions we've got here is how do I secure my first role in sustainability, and what do hiring managers expect from me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of the conversations, and thank you for that question as well. It's a very common one that I it's a discussion that I have on a regular basis. So I think the first thing in sustainability, it can be really overwhelming to understand where to start, because I think if you're sort of drawn to wanting to make a difference, there's normally so many opportunities for you to get involved in. So that there's the first, I guess there are three fundamental pillars in terms of the advice. It's one, get really clear on what you're most passionate about. Are you really curious around renewable energy? Do you really like social impact? And it doesn't really matter where you start, because this space just evolves at speed, and where you might land your first role isn't necessarily where you're going to end up in 10 or 15 years' time, but it's all still really meaningful. So get curious about a particular sector, and then start looking at organisations that deliver opportunities. So that could be looking at a large ASX listed organisation that has, multiple interests in using renewables as a part of its overall solution, or it could be, in the technology space as well. So I think, just to go back to some really critical takeaways, don't get so overwhelmed about where you need to start. You can just start. Sustainability doesn't need to be in your position title in order for you to have impact. Sustainability is a choice and a behaviour change at the end of the day. So even if you do land your first role that doesn't seem to look like anything like sustainability on the surface, seek out opportunities internally to actually, maybe pioneer a sustainability community internally, champion activities, but also start looking at organisations that are going to give you that mentorship and that opportunity to grow into a sustainability role down the track.
Right, and I think it's getting started.
Getting started.
It's always the hardest thing to really get the first role. There's a question here around what skills and qualifications do I need, and again links to Claire's point around, or it depends on where you want to focus your career. There's a lot of institutions creating content around this at the moment. There's short courses, there's full degrees in this space. The degrees are quite challenging because, again, it is evolving so quickly. So when you start a degree, the content is already moved by the time you finish. But it is something that a lot of institutions are looking at. We're not necessarily seeing organisations ask for specific skills at this point in time, unless it is something around data or if it's a technical environmental role. But there is definitely a preference for experience over qualifications at this point in time. So it's a supporter, and certainly I'm a strong advocate for continued education and building those skills. But you shouldn't just rely on that. Say, okay, well, I've got this degree, so therefore I'm going to have a raft of roles and opportunities here for me. I think it is about the full package. So looking to lean on any voluntary experience or experience you can get, and then balance that with the skills.
Absolutely.
Question here around how to find an entry-level position.
Where do you start? Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of goes back to the initial question that we responded to. So I think once you've got some clarity around the areas that interest you most, let's use the renewables for the sake of this conversation. So understanding what organisations are getting involved in that particular sector. So again, I wouldn't get too caught up on a particular position title or having sustainability in the actual position. I'd start getting curious about organisations that are of interest to you. So do your values align? Do you like their vision? Do you like their mission? When you profile the leaders in the organisation, can you see what they stand for? Could you be proud about talking about that organisation with your peers and your family? So I think in terms of looking for that entry-level position, understand the level of mentorship that you're ideally speaking may play into that decision. So you might be looking for organisations that are slightly larger. The local councils, also state government agencies, and a whole range of larger organisations obviously have a really, really well-structured business proposition for graduate and entry-level positions, more so than a smaller organisation. But I guess the key message is to take away from that question that's just been asked is be worried less on a position title. Don't get too hung up on the fact that sustainability may not be in that position title either, and really just focus on the organisations that you're interested in. Have a general trawl through the careers page, see what's available, get familiar with the roles that are out there, and just start applying for roles that you think you're going to be generally interested in doing.
Yeah, great. There's a question here about how to differentiate yourself when you don't have experience, and this one is close to my heart. My 18-year-old son went for a job interview this morning, and he doesn't have experience. It's and the question is, around how do you stand out? So I'm not sure he listened to me, but hopefully there are some points in here. But it's really about how do you stand out from the crowd? So if you're applying for every role that you see, it's very hard to differentiate. They might have 100 CVs that they're receiving. So focus on the roles that you really want to apply for, and be realistic about how your experience or skills or interests line up with that role, because that will come through, that passion will come through in the cover letter, in the CV. And so it's really about finding those unique elements. If you can find out who the hiring manager is, connect on LinkedIn, have a look at your alumni from your university, other connections, and and also think about your online presence. So recruiters do look at your online profile. So just have a think about how what you do outside of work as well as at work.
How's that landing? Yeah, absolutely.
There is a quick question here saying, basically saying that fair enough that we spend time on a cover letter and CV, but in my personal experience, 50% of roles I apply for, I don't get a response from. But we are seeing more of that these days. And you see it on job ads where it says, we will only contact shortlisted candidates or people that we bring in for interview. It's not a great experience for anyone. I had an old boss that told me that we were in the job of saying no to people because you would have 100 people apply for a role and only one person would get it. And so, trying to ensure that you treat everyone with empathy and respect through the process while also managing that volume can be a challenge. I think, again, it is a case that if you're not getting those responses, you maybe need to look at how are you differentiating yourself, because that may just be a company policy that the organisation has, is that they just respond. In today's age, that shouldn't be a challenge because everyone should get a response back. Particularly if you are putting the effort in, and it is hard work, and you do invest a lot in that next role. So certainly hope that you are getting those responses back.
And I think if I can just add to that, I think sometimes the awareness as an individual applicant, you don't have visibility around the rest of the candidate pool who applied. And, perhaps, it is very difficult to get really specific feedback around where your application hasn't landed. But, sometimes it's more around where your application sits in the broader candidate pool as opposed to where your level of experience actually sits. So remembering that, potentially you're in a pool of, as Richard mentioned, 100 candidates for a particular role, that organisation needs to be really discerning around where they focus their effort in terms of who they connect with.